As Iran's ongoing nuclear program picks up steam, the Jewish state has decided the Islamic Republic must be prevented from acquiring nuclear weapons one way or another.
The Ma'ariv newspaper has revealed that Israel's leadership resolved 3 months ago to do whatever necessary to prevent Iran from acquiring nuclear weapons. Ma'ariv's political reporter Ben Caspit stopped short of detailing the precise solution Israel will implement to put an end to Iran's nuclear program, but writes, preparations for an Israeli military option intended to stop Iran's nuclear program are underway. Caspit wrote that the results of a series of highest-level discussions are clear. Any question whether Israel would allow Iranian nukes has been ended. According to Ma'ariv, Israel is drawing up plans, so if the U.S. doesn't act militarily, and if sanctions continue to prove ineffective, a military strike will be launched by Israel within the year. At present, the U.S. is trying to prevent a strike, refusing to give Israel the necessary permission and codes to overfly Iraq to make an Iran attack possible. A security source put it this way: the Americans have accepted the fact that Iran will be a nuclear power and are trying to get us to accept it too. Former Deputy Defense Minister Ephraim Sneh has proposed another option, a total international embargo on spare parts for Iran's oil industry and a complete international boycott of Iran's banks. Sneh, who recently resigned from his Labour Party Knesset seat to form a new party, visited last week in Switzerland and Austria, two countries that have announced plans for huge oil and gas investments in the Islamic Republic in the coming years. Reportedly, Sneh remarked to investors while there what a shame it would be to invest in industries which would soon be burned.
The terms of office of both PA Chairman Mahmoud Abbas and Prime Minister Olmert are drawing to a close. Despite this, efforts are underway to clinch a final status agreement. Here to provide analysis is Yoni Kapinski. Shalom, Yoni.
Shalom, Aaron.
All right, Yoni. There have been rumors floating around that Olmert is trying to reach a final deal with Abbas. Are these rumors true? And if they are, what would this deal entail?
Well, Aaron, Mark Regev, Olmert's spokesman, has confirmed that some sort of deal is being pushed by the Prime Minister. So there's no question that there's something in works. What remains unclear is what exactly has been promised, but any kind of final status deal would have to tackle the very problematic issues of the borders, Jerusalem, and foreign Arabs who want to immigrate to Israel en masse, destroying Israel's Jewish character.
Now, why is the government so desperate to reach a deal?
Okay, so there are several factors. The first and strongest is intense American pressure against Israel to make ever greater concessions to the Arabs. This is not new. This has been long been American policy to pressure Israel in favor of the Arabs. What has changed is the intensity, with 7 trips by U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice to the Middle East in the last year alone. A large part of the motivation comes from the fact that U.S. President George W. Bush is nearing the end of his time in office and his popularity is extraordinarily low. And President Bush very much wants to secure a legacy for himself, which he thinks he can get through a Middle East peace deal. The next factor is Olmert himself. The premier is, to a certain extent, under siege with a shaky coalition and multiple police investigations. The premier is hoping the media will strengthen his position if he can present some sort of peace deal. On the other end, Mahmoud Abbas leads Fatah. That's the dominant branch of the PLO, but the PLO is in decline and has been for some time being supplanted primarily by Hamas, but also by other more Islamic terror groups. And so Abbas needs to show he can get things done to show the Arabs that he rules and that Fatah should be supported rather than his Islamic rivals.
You mentioned Jerusalem. What exactly is the premier considering?
So first of all, it's important to mention that this is unclear, but what is known for sure is that Ehud Olmert wants at least a partial division of the city, maybe with some sort of deal to grant Jews access to the holy places in East Jerusalem. There have been reports that Olmert wants to bring in the so-called international community as advisors to mediate on how the city should be divided. This would be the EU and Quartet, as well as possibly Jordan and maybe the Vatican and Egypt. It should be remembered that all these countries and organizations have varying degrees of hostility towards Israel, either for reasons of real politic, like the EU, which views Israel as an irritant provoking the Arab states, and the Vatican, in whose eyes Israel is a theological impossibility. Now, Olmert has also talked about any agreement not taking effect for 1 to 5 years. This was originally suggested by the U.S., but it would be an effective method of binding Israel to a deal the Olmert government wouldn't have to enforce.
Now, let's say some sort of agreement is reached. Would future governments honor this deal?
Well, in truth, there's no way to know for sure what any government will do, but the answer is probably. It has to be remembered that the leader of the opposition and the next Prime Minister is Benjamin Netanyahu, and in 1996 he became Prime Minister following a campaign which focused on attacking the Oslo Accords, signed by his predecessor, Labour Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, which brought the PLO to Israel. But during Netanyahu's first speech before the Knesset, the then premier stated Israel had to keep its agreements and couldn't abrogate Oslo. Now, this statement doesn't sound that strange, but a centerpiece of Netanyahu's campaign was the numerous violations of Oslo by the PLO. Normally, violations of a treaty are enough to warrant abrogation. Now, the Likud chairman may surprise us and reverse the last 13 years of Israeli policy, but Netanyahu's track record in regards to upholding deals, even treaties he personally opposes, implies whatever Olmert agrees to will be with Israel for a long time.
Yoni, thank you very much. A new school year is beginning tomorrow, September 1st. Our correspondent, Tenna Samuel, spoke with a representative of the B'Tselem organization, which promotes child safety, about how to have our children travel to and from school in safety.
B'Tselem, the National Center for Children's Health and Safety, is a non-profit organization whose mission is to create a safe world for children in Israel. As the school year begins, B'Tselem wishes to remind parents that there is much to be aware of on the way to and from school.
The greatest danger is, of course, all the cars around the school and children that are crossing the street alone.
Children crossing the street alone is a widespread phenomenon, as many parents feel their kid is grown up enough. Even if you feel they're responsible, B'Tselem demands that you do not allow them to cross alone early.
People should know that until the age of 9, children cannot walk without an escort of an adult. They have to walk to be accompanied by an adult.
While the need to buckle up in a car is widely known, it sometimes seems when it comes to a bus, that's less important. In Israel, the law now makes sure that won't be the situation.
In Israel, we have a mandatory law that requires that in every school bus there is safety belt. So it's very important that children will be buckled up in these seat belts.
B'Tselem, affiliated with the American Safe Kids organization, has joined an international project called I Walk to School.
Walking is healthy and it's environment friendly, and also it's more safe, because if children are walking, we have less vehicles around the school surrounding and less injuries. So we have a walking school bus, which means a parent or an adult is accompanying 5 or 7 children to school. The adult is the driver, and the children are being picked up from their houses. So these are the bus stops.
That wraps up today's newscast. Join us again tomorrow for another edition. Until then, shalom from all of us here at Arutz Sheva, Israel National News.